Hi guys, it's Kathy. I am going to show you how to make this adorable journal step by step. We went to the beach recently and I wanted to make a journal, so here we go. I was inspired by these little beautiful watercolor prints I found in my favorite bookstore. The artist is Enid Romanek. She has a website that I will put in the description, and they're just all beautiful little scenes from this town in Delaware, Bethany, that we go to. It's right on the Atlantic Ocean, and all my favorite little places. There's a totem pole from the center of town. So yeah, I brought them home not knowing I was going to do this, and I thought I'm going to make a little journal and highlight these beautiful little places from our vacation. And yep, that's what I did. So I'm going to start out just by taking off the white around the pictures. I just want the picture. I love her style. It's just kind of a whimsical watercolor style. She's a really great artist. And all of our little favorite areas she just brought to life. So I had this idea about using a punch and making the end of the picture a tab. So I have this Spellbinders punch. It's a little bit smaller than what my card was, but I thought, well, I can trim that down a little. So I did an example, and I thought, yep, this will work. So I looked at each little image and decided which end I wanted to trim. And I thought, well, I'll do 4 of them to the left and 4 to the right. So that's what I did. See, so there was a little extra. So I would just go in and trim off that little extra piece. And it just basically looks like a tag shape. So I ended up putting some tea stain on the back of those and punching the hole and adding an eyelet to the end of it. I also tea stained the envelopes. My initial idea actually was to do an envelope journal. And then the more I thought about it with what I was working with, I thought, nah, I'm just going to do a 2-signature journal. And I had a couple of different thoughts, but I did use the envelopes in the journal, as you'll see. Okay, so I have 4 to the left and 4 to the right. And I just saved one of those. I simply took some pinking shears and cut around that and made like a little stamp out of that cute little image that was on the back of each card. And then inked them up, and I thought, oh yes, I will be using those in that journal. So I have some other memorabilia that I took from the beach. This was actually a car tag from where we stayed. It's called Addie at the Sea. It's a 100-year-old bed and breakfast. And I decided I wanted to punch that into a hole, but I didn't have a hole puncher that was big enough. So I have this little gizmo. It's from Fiskars, and you can do custom size cuts with a hole. It works pretty good. I think it goes from about 1/2 inch to 6 inches. So you get it where you want it, you tighten it up, and there's a little blade there on the end. The only downside of this is you cannot really see where the middle is, so you have to kind of guess. But it is nice and it works well. It just about cut through that. This place is very special. We've been going here for years, and it's right on the ocean. So it's really nice to just roll out of bed and go out. They've got the beach chairs and the umbrellas and everything right there. So I'm just sanding that, inking it up, and then decided that I wanted to do a little something special to this. So I thought about stenciling, but then thought, no, let's just do embossing with some of the translucent Distress embossing glaze. And I like this circular one, thought that would be nice. So I'm using a little bit of the Distress glaze as a medium to hold the powder. Just put a little bit on that brush. And it has to be just a very light layer, circular motions. And it will grab onto that powder, and the beauty of it is it gives a beautiful, crisp picture or image of your stencil. So I'm using some antique linen embossing glaze there, which is translucent. So I'll just do a close-up here of that so you can see. And those white areas in the background, I'd like to add a little distress stain because that should soak in there nice around that. So I decided to use that's a bag from the bookstore, and I tea stained all of that. And I remembered I had this Elizabeth Craft Design die cut for a small journal like this. It was the perfect size. And it had that binding that was a little bit bigger. And that's what I needed because I wanted to do a 2-signature journal. So this worked out perfect. I thought it would be cute to have that those graphics along the binding. So I cut the front and back. That's a journal made with that die cut. It'll be in the description. But I cut the front and back out of that from a coffee-stained manila folder. But the thing is that these are just rectangles. You do not need a die cut for this. You can just cut yourself a rectangle, score a few score lines in it with whatever width you want for the binding, and that would have been just fine. I just happened to have it on hand and remembered about it, thought, oh, this might be nice. It also has these 2 die cuts that come with it that have holes in them that you can put along that binding on the side. You'll see. I'm going to use it for a map that I purchased, and I'm going to use it in a different place. So I'm just kind of fitting it, and I think that's going to work nice. So here are the 2 fabrics I used for the outside and the inside of this little journal. They're part of the new Tim Holtz fabric release in turquoise. And they really went perfect with what I was doing. So I'm just kind of pulling out some of my journal pages and toppers to show you the color scheme I had going for this. I'm using some of my dyed papers from my last video. And I'm excited about this project. I think it's going to be fun. So we'll just tear down that fabric and get a piece for the front, a piece for the back. I will use some Fabri-Tac and get those glued on with a little bit of lace. I will want to sew this lace and sew around the front and back pages and the binding as well, but that's going to have to just dry for a little bit before I sew it. Okay, let's get this glued together. We'll use a little Fabri-Tac and get the front and back cover glued onto that binding. So I wanted to show you what I did with a couple of the pages. These are the envelopes that I tea stained. So I simply just put one top into the other envelope and just glued that flap down. I thought that it would just make a fun pocket on each side, and I wanted to use those up. So we'll get that glued in as well. And I'd like to put something in the middle of those 2 pages, so I decided to just use this ledger paper. So I'm just going to measure a piece of that and use my glue stick and slide that right in there. So when you open those pages up, you'll just have some interest in there, maybe a little something to journal on. It's a nice way to use filler for pockets. Just sliding that paper works really well. I did the same thing to another 2 envelopes, and I used a book page in the middle. Okay, so I'm just going to put a topper on the outside of that envelope using some of my dyed paper. It's funny, I chose the one with the decoupage paper on it, the one that was ripped for my last video. It's just interesting and cool, I guess. So here's a couple of end pieces from those maps I talked about. And I want to use, these are 2 envelopes that I just opened up and made flip outs. And there's those holes that are punched in them, like I told you. So I decided I wanted some color to peek through. And I also wanted to stain the Addy badge. So I'm going to use a little bit of those two red distress oxides and just kind of drag those things through and add some color to those pages. I think that Addy sign had a little bit of, it was a little bit glossy paper because initially the red dye did not stick to that white area, and it should have. But I think that what I'm going to do is just drag it through a second time and let it sit and absorb a little bit more, and then I'll wipe it off, and that red should come right off those embossed areas but stay in the other ones. So here we go, just adding red to those flaps, and it looks like a little bit of a disaster, but it really did, it came out nice. I was happy with it. It's like, what is she doing? What a mess. Oh my goodness. So here we go. We'll get those glued on. They were a little bit short for the areas there, so I used some washi tape. And we'll just get those things trimmed up in a minute. And yeah. It came out cute. So that's the third journal page I made out of envelopes. So that's it for the envelope journal pages. But I don't know why. I probably could have just used coffee stain paper. But I decided I wanted to use those. And then, yeah, as you can see, that Addy sign really came out nice. So I thought that since the back of that tab was going to be sticking out, I wanted to decorate it a little bit. I decided to, because you'd see the backs, to stain and put a little stenciling on the back of those. Because 4 of them you will see the back side and 4 you'll see the front side. I took some frayed burlap and just simply went over the base layer, and then used a little salvaged patina and that checkered stencil and went over that. And it's a really nice combination. I love the frayed burlap and the salvaged patina together. I'll just show you one of those. I am going to just spray a little bit of droplets of water on here to just get a little bit of oxidation, and thought, well, I'll do it all together. So I just gave my Distress water bottle a little gentle squeeze to get bigger drops out, and used my heating tool, and I got some really nice watermarks on there just to break that up a little bit. If you heat set it first, it gives a nice little ring around it. I chose some red and some yellow washi tape that was graphic, and just added that underneath that little stenciled area. Yeah, these are great little cards. They're journaling cards. That's what I thought when I thought, how can I make these like little journaling cards? So I'm just laying them out for you to see them. They're kind of cool. Yeah. I wanted to show you here. I wanted to figure out a way to hold these beautiful little cards, and I decided to use vellum. So I'm using this embossing folder called Airmail because I figured it was about travel. And I put a little stain on the inside of the embossing folder. On the deboss side, I used Vintage Photo. And then on the embossed side, I used Speckled Egg, knowing that would be underneath and that I would swipe a little on top after it came out. So I spritzed the embossing folder lightly and then got those embossed. And the speckled egg wasn't dark enough for me. I even went over the top, but it still was a little bit on the light side. So I decided to go over it with a little salvaged patina, and I really like the darker turquoise on there. So I'm cutting little pockets for all my cards, putting a little thumb hole in there, and this was a nice addition to the journal and held those little watercolor cards perfectly. All right, I think we're going to just glue one of these in together. Use my art glitter glue, it worked well. And I've laid those out, and I found that if you did one at the top of the page and the next one at the bottom of the page, they kind of looked nice with that size journal. I ended up going back and rounding the corners because, as you know, vellum that's embossed, it kind of was catching on that, and it worked so much better. So here we go. We are going to get this journal put together. So I am going to just cut a little piece of fabric for that binding. I decided to do a hidden binding because I really like the Bethany Beach bookstore logo on that binding, and I didn't really want to sew through it. So we will do a 5-hole signature with 2 signatures, and I am going to cut a little piece of cardstock to put on the back of that just to add a little extra. Here are those vintage maps. I found this great site. I'll put it on the description of this person that has these beautiful vintage maps. And it's fun because whatever your area from, they had a lot of different areas, but I was happy to find one from the Maryland, Delaware seashore. So here we go. I'm just laying this in there, not gluing it, but I thought if I lay that in there, I will be able to get a better idea of the fabric being centered on that. So I just kind of did that. So we'll get that on without making too much of a mess. There we go. Now I'm making a template. These are not centimeters, so I just kind of folded it in half, folded it in half again, just to get my seams to make my marks. Always write top on the top part so you can always keep your orientation right. So here we go. I'm just paper clipping that onto the paper side so I could line it up in the right spot. I'm going to take my awl and I am just going to go through these, and then we'll go through the signatures and we'll get that sewed in. All right, just making sure all the pages are in the right place. I'm getting my template in place, and we will use our awl and just poke through only about a 1/4 inch. You don't want the hole to be any bigger than it needs to be, because that can make your thread sloppy in there. So we'll use 3 times the height of the journal. I use a really nice linen thread, and I take a little candlestick and just kind of put a little wax on that. It helps with gliding the thread through the binding. I found it very helpful. So we're going to start in the middle, and we're just going to weave in and out. And then when we come back down to the middle, we are going to skip the middle and go down to the next hole, and that way we will come up through the middle at the end. So here we go. Just going to tie 2 knots in that. We've got the first one sewn in. we go. Well, let's get the next one done. So I've got that sewn in as well. I just fast forwarded that. And we will get this glued into the cover. I'm going to put Fabri-Tac on those fabric wings, and then I also put a little bit on the binding thread to just make sure everything stays put. If you have any questions about that, please ask in the comments. I'm sorry that I kind of flew through that whole journal binding. I just didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. I hope that it was clear enough. But please feel free to ask questions. I hope you're liking this video. This was a really fun video for me to make. Just putting a couple books on there. So now I wanted to make a crab for the front. I've painted a crab before on a piece of driftwood, and so I kind of had an idea of what I was doing. The legs are basically just segments, so it really isn't that difficult. So this is just like a freehand crab I'm drawing. Remembering I'm trying to keep it the right size for the front of my journal, so I did end up changing it a little bit, cutting off some of those legs as I was fussy cutting it, to try to keep it a little bit smaller. I'm using watercolor paper. So we'll just go in with some watercolors and add some color to this. This is a Maryland blue crab. So we got to go crabbing with some friends who they actually have a summer home on the Eastern Shore. So when we go down, we usually visit them, and they have a boat. So we went out and went crabbing. And it was really a lot of fun. We had to put chicken necks on hooks and drop them into the bayside, and we did catch a bunch of crabs. And my husband, who is a retired chef, made an amazing pot of cream of crab soup for dinner, and it was a whole lot of fun. So I wanted to do a crab for the front of this journal. So I'm just needing to blend this because right now it looks kind of interesting. I hope that I can get that a little better blended. It's funny when you watch this after the fact. Yeah, I think it came out cute. So, just going to get this fussy cut. And then I wanted to add a little spray on here, like some gold splatter or something. And I decided I'd use a little bit of Distress tarnished brass spray stain. And I remembered I had that little stencil with the little tiny circles that are irregular. So I thought, ooh, that'll be good. I'll just spray a little bit of that on top and give that crab some dots. And then I decided to add a little bit of clear embossing powder to just make him special and stand out on the front of that journal. And yeah, it's pretty cute. So I was trying to figure out where to put him, and I had some help. My husband came in and he's like, no, I think you should put it down there. No, maybe put it up there. It was nice to have his opinion. So that's what that third hand is. I left it in there. I didn't edit it out. We got that figured out. And I wanted to add red to the front of that cover. So I decided to just use that washi tape that I used on my little picture tags. And I'm happy with that. So I'll put one strip down the front. And I will put the yellow strip on the back. Yeah. But what a great thing to make for a vacation, right? Or even if you went with someone on vacation, you could give this to someone as a gift. And it was just a fun to signature journal to make, and I will print out some of the photos from our trip and fill that in. As I said, I'm not going to decorate this. I'm just constructing the journal, basically. So let's get those cards in there. I wanted to glue the crab and the Addy sign on last because I knew that I would need to use Fabri-Tac and just put a little book on top of it or something. So I'm just putting those in. And then I thought, well, I'll put these little stamps in there. I keep saying I'm not going to decorate, and I keep doing things. So I just went through and added my little picture stamps to the journal. But if you ever are in Maryland or Delaware, it is a beautiful seashore. The Delaware seashore is beautiful. And Bethany has a boardwalk, and we went to the fireworks, and it's just something we do every year. I really enjoy it. A lot of good restaurants, a lot of good eats. I did get too much sun. I'm mad at myself for doing that. I think it was the day on the boat. I didn't reapply sunscreen like I should have, and I got a bad burn. All right, so let's go ahead and get that on the front. My favorite crafting tool, wooden clothespins. I use them all the time. All right, so it is finished. I like those tabs. I think it was a good way to use those little cards. They're cute little journal cards now, and I can write little notes on the back of those from my time there. So I'm just flipping through. It's fun to flip through a journal after you've sewn it in, and it kind of feels so much more like a book. So thank you for joining me. I am happy with this little journal. I hope you found some inspiration, and then you'll try this for yourself. I'm adding a short clip here at the end of our nature walks that we took through that preserve. So thanks. Love you guys. Bye.